meds. She's on like medicine and stuff. And so I had to call him. I was like, hey, like, we have to bring the dog now. Like, I didn't need an extra piece. The hotel lady upgraded our hotel room for free. And all I had to do was pay to pet the dog. It was so awesome. That's so great.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm actually driving out to Portland this afternoon. I've got a conference up there, and my sister lives in Oregon City. So
I'm headed that way this afternoon also.
We're all headed that way.
I live down an hour south of Portland. So.
Gotcha. Well, looks like we've got about 7 or 8 people on Zoom. So I guess that's where the rest of the folks are here today. So welcome. Happy Friday. I hope that you're doing well and enjoying the week. I know we've got a lot of exciting updates for folks that are doing extracurriculars and athletics, going to meets, competitions, representing the EOU. So awesome job with doing that. So as we get into the end of this week, I want to just tie up some loose ends and talk about some ideas related to group leadership, how we can run and create a good and effective group by using those team leadership skills. So what I want you to do is to take some time to think again about a particular notable group leader. It could be somebody that you wrote about if you were here for Monday's class, or somebody else that has emerged or that you've come to think about as an important or valuable leader for you. And once you've done that, I want you to take some time to just write down what you feel like some of the qualities or things that person does, in your opinion, make them a good leader. So we'll start with that. And then once you've done that, I want you to think about how they created a good or effective team. So as we've talked about so far in the class, right, a good leader does not just mean that it's somebody who is able to show good traits for themselves, right, but that they are able to create a good group dynamic or good collaboration between other people. And I'll write this down on the slide to help have that prompt available for you. Yeah, sure. Wait, PowerPoint crash. Sorry about that.
I don't want to talk about it.
I'm just excited to go home and my cat again.
Oh, yeah.
Spring break.
So
I get to be in like 80-degree weather in spring break. Where are you going? Cali. Oh.
I'm going to
What part of Cali?
Palm Springs.
I love Palm Springs.
I get to drive down to Texas.
Drive?
Ooh, San Antonio.
I've done that. Driving?
Yeah, it's for tracking.
So spring break, also the time that I turned 30.
Oh, really?
Ooh.
Well, happy,
Yeah.
happy early birthday.
Thank you. I think we're gonna hopefully rent a place to stay on the coast. We haven't decided where on the coast yet.
I would.
Oregon or
recommend-
California?
Oregon.
I would recommend probably Lincoln City because it's got a lot to do because it's pretty close to Newport, but Lincoln City's got their like old town area with like
Yeah,
there's a lot of
yeah,
stuff down there. Newport's also really good.
Yeah.
If you want to go to like a touristy place, you go to Seaside and there's a lot to do in Seaside.
Yeah, we've been up to Cannon Beach a lot, and I really like that area. I'm thinking about Lincoln City. We also like Astoria quite a bit too.
I go to Lincoln.
My family is.
I go to Lincoln City for lunch and fishing and crabbing.
Awesome. did that years ago.
We went out, me and some buddies, because we didn't have a lot of money at the time, and we went out on like this 12-foot boat, and it was just this little dinky thing we rented for like $100 for the day. It had a 9.9 horsepower engine on it. We could go. I pulled out my phone. I got this speedometer. We were going like 5 miles an hour, and then the tide started coming back in, and so it got really wavy in the bay, and we were sitting there, and it took us a half hour to get from that place to the main docks in Newport, and you could see them. It's not like it was a long ways away, and we had to take a gallon of water, and we had to cut it open and use it to take water out of the boat because it was filling up so much. We had to go get all our crap pots and stuff.
That's awesome. I think we underestimated how long they take to cook and to prepare.
Yeah. It cracks me up when like one time my uncle got his finger grabbed. I grabbed when we were getting ready to cook and we grabbed one and grabbed his finger and hit.
Oh, that.
How would you like put into words like someone just like emulates that you want to do good things for them, if that makes sense?
Oh yeah, that like you just sort of feel almost
Like
an
they're such a good
obligation or-
person that you want to like help them.
Yeah, I mean, I think being like an element of a role model would be part of that, right? Maybe the idea of like mutual support.
I just couldn't figure out like the right words to express that emotion.
Like invested in their success. But I understand the sensation you're describing.
Yeah, I can fully feel it. I just
Yeah.
Explain it.
explain it in the words.
Yeah.
I'm reading a book right now and they like listed off like a ton of different things that like don't have words. And it hurts me now because I'm like, what are the words? Like there needs to be words for these. Like there should be a word for feeling nostalgic.
Oh yeah. You mean like most millennials feel about the 90s?
You know how I was born in 02, but you know how I feel about the 90s? They're pretty sweet.
Yeah, it's interesting to see like particularly like German words that are used to describe very specific sensations that we don't have
Yeah,
translated. into
That was
English.
one of them was like when the sun like just hits you the first thing in the morning and like, you feel that warmth like internally.
Yeah.
That was a word. There's not a word for that.
Some
You know, it's just like different things. A lot of it was like mentally things that make you like feel happy. They don't have words for specifically for those attributes.
Yeah.
What kind of shows where we're at is
It says a lot about like culture and like language and communication too. You know, we obviously borrowed a lot of language from other cultures and groups, and also that, you know, the words or sensations that we try to make into words or make important really differ in culture too. I think like, for instance, umami as a specific like heat sensation and far from other cultures as well. So thanks for taking the time to do a little bit of work here on sort of this idea of a good team leader, right? A group leader. We'll talk a little bit more about that in just a minute. Again, I think today is fairly low key and just kind of an opportunity to add some wisdoms. So we talked last class about situations and contexts that give rise to leadership. For instance, right, shows like Designated Survivor, where suddenly you are the president and you have to take on all these roles, is one example of an emergent leader. We also talked about how to be a good leader, some strategies and things you can do, and skills. Just as a reminder, you've got that small group essay that's coming up. I've heard from a few people about some of the clubs and activities on campus that they're looking into. One thing I mentioned toward the end of last class that is really helpful as you're working on it is just to get in touch with other people in the class or maybe in other classes that you've had to see what kind of clubs or activities they're a part of. In fact, I encourage you to like partner up or maybe find somebody who's on another team or activity that you could easily reach out to and do maybe a mutual of whether you're meeting, you go to my meeting. Just make sure, again, that you've got permission from that person. Later today, I'll post like a template email that you could send to a member of the group to indicate if you're interested in observing. I'm also going to be posting today Google Form where you can indicate your preferences during the final week of the quarter. That Monday, Wednesday, Friday, I'll give you the option to choose of those 3 days, which you know you can't make it for, and if there's any days of those 3 you strongly lean toward. Since we have about, kind of like the high teens of people in the class, we'll probably do somewhere around 6 or 7 of the presentations each day. So I'm not going to have them be super long. But it'll be a good chance for us to hear what we've learned and observed from the group participation. So I'm looking forward to that. Again, we talked about some of the ways to show good leadership, right? This idea that we can understand the roles, responsibilities, goals of the team. And again, this idea that good leaders are not dictators, but they're open to new ideas and perspectives. We also talked last class about the idea that a good leader creates the sense of community, right? So I asked you to think a little bit about how group members work effectively, because I think that understanding the way that they create community and camaraderie is a really important skill. For instance, again, when I was on the debate team, we just have people alternate, play their favorite music in the car. It was a really fun way for people to get to know each other better and create community. In fact, we have music that we like play as roll-in music. We were really into the like 2000s era hip hop, and we would just play it as we were like driving into a competition to get ourselves pumped out. It's kind of fun. So for today, one really key idea that I want to get into, you might be familiar with this concept if you have taken a class in conflict management, is the concern of groupthink. So one of the easiest ways to think about groupthink is lemmings off a cliff. You've heard that expression or phrase, right? Lemmings, little rodent creatures, see other lemmings like jumping off a cliff, and they decide, you know what, I'll do it too. This idea that an appeal to popularity being a fallacy that because other people do it, it must be correct or it must be true, right? There are a lot of factually incorrect statements that a majority of people might believe. So groupthink is an important consideration here when we're working together in groups. If you've ever found yourself in a group, for instance, for this class or another class where you find that you're just agreeing with everybody, like you think that everybody basically has the same opinion, you don't have a whole lot to debate or disagree or talk about, there's a good chance that's not entirely the case. The groupthink is at play. So groupthink is this idea that we are more interested in accepting or latching on to what the group thinks and what we believe the group believes on a topic, and less likely to share the individual concerns or fears that we might have. There's a lot of reasons that we might choose not to share our opinion or to share our concerns with the group. One of them is this idea that we don't want to rock the boat. We don't like the idea of presenting an idea that complicates things, especially if you want a group meeting to run on time and to run efficiently. For instance, if you're hiring somebody for a job and everybody says, hey, person A is a great candidate, hire person A, and you say, actually, I think person B is a better choice. But you're the only one that thinks person B is a better choice, right? Then you might not share your opinion because you just want to go along with the majority. You worry that you're going to make the meeting go longer, people are going to get angry with you and disagree with you, and so on. You might doubt your own opinion. You hear other people who have expressed something differently, and you think to yourself, maybe I'm wrong. You might also feel like you've been persuaded or convinced by members of the group and the opinions that they have. As a result of that, you don't share your own perspective. So group things are really, really, really big problem. right? In fact, there are a ton of classic examples in cases in which groupthink has created some really big national and international crises, right? A few that immediately come to mind, if you've ever heard of the Bay of Pigs disaster, right? This was a huge foreign policy failure under the John F. Kennedy administration, right? It was a case in which this entire operation was a bust because there were members close to the president's cabinet, secretaries of state, and other close leaders who had reservations and concerns with the plan, but chose not to share them because they saw people in power and authority who were down with the plan and didn't want to disagree or cross them. You can also think about some really kind of distressing pieces of like advertising and public relations failure. So there have been like a lot of really bad, poorly produced films, movies, and commercials. One commercial that comes to mind, if you recall, I think it was, I get my Jenners, Kardashians, all them mixed up because either Kylie or Kendall, who was in a TV ad for Pepsi, and the ad involved like, it was trying to make social commentary about like police and police reform issues. And the idea was that there was civil unrest and like protests, and then she gives a Pepsi to an officer, and then suddenly everybody's happy. And that got a ton of, as you could imagine, backlash. And people are like, how the heck did this air? How did this get created? And a good answer to that is groupthink, right? So there are a lot of cases in which just really bad ideas or concepts or issues come forward. And the reason that these, what you would consider as an outsider to be really bad ideas or really big failures happen is because of issues of groupthink. And, whether or not you think that the Afghanistan withdrawal was a good idea, I think we can certainly agree that it could have been done much better. And groupthink is another sort of symptom of some of the reasons that ended up going as messily as it did. One kind of example that I want to highlight here is the 1986 Challenger disaster. So have you heard of this case? Have you heard of this Challenger? Cool. So this happened in 1986 under the Reagan administration. So for some context, right, it was this really, think about the sort of Cold War era arms race, space race. The United States was very much trying to be active in space exploration and launched or attempted to launch a new space shuttle, the Challenger. However, this space shuttle crashed and blew up 74 seconds after it launched. And it killed everybody inside, for like 13 or 14 people. And I think it was one of the people was going to be like the first teacher in space too. Really sad, right? However, the reason that the Challenger space shuttle blew up was because of issues of groupthink. So NASA and Morton Thiel, who was the company that created the rocket boosters that were used and essentially malfunctioned during the explosion, had some concerns about this project. Some of the calculations weren't quite right. Some of the scientists were worried that this explosion might happen, but they faced a lot of administrative pressure because, again, in the United States, they were really trying to do this kind of space race, really get the project out there. So despite these concerns, they didn't actually end up expressing them, and the project moved forward. So because of that, we saw a pretty major problem. I wanted to share a clip from this Challenger explosion and to add context on this issue. And again, the ways that it connects to problems of groupthink.
T-minus 21 seconds, and the solid rocket booster engine gimbal now underway. T-minus 15 seconds. T-minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6. We have main engine start. 4, 3, 2, 1, And liftoff of the 25th Space Shuttle mission, and it is cleared the tower.
Control program confirmed. Shelter heading down range. Engine beginning throttling down now at 94%. Normal throttles for most of the flight 104%. We'll throttle down to 65% shortly. Engines at 65%. 3 engines running normally, 3 good fuel cells, 3 good APUs. Velocity 2,257 feet per second. Altitude 4.3 nautical miles. Downrange distance 3 nautical miles.
So the 25th Space Shuttle mission is now on the way after more delays than NASA cares to count. This morning, it looked as though they were not going to be able to get off.
115 seconds. Velocity 2,900 feet per second. Altitude 9 nautical miles. Downrange distance 7 nautical miles.
Looks like a couple of the solid rocket boosters flew away from the side of the shuttle in an explosion.
Flight crews are looking very carefully at the situation. Obviously a major malfunction. We have no downlinks.
We're waiting word. They're holding their breath, just I'm sure as everyone else is. You saw it just a few moments ago, about 45 seconds after liftoff, a huge fireball in the sky.
We have a report from the flight dynamics officer that the vehicle has exploded. Flight director confirms that. We are looking at checking with the recovery forces to see what can be done at this point.
So, obviously a pretty extreme example. There's a good chance that, issues you might have with participating in a group are not going to cause 14 people to die in an explosion. Hopefully not. But there's still consequences toward groupthink and products not going the way that we hope they will. So some of the things that we can think about here in terms of combating and dealing, again, with this issue of groupthink, people not expressing their full opinion, of people feeling rushed to get something done and off the ground, of people having concerns with calculations, rocket boosters, but not expressing them. A few things that we can do. Again, I think playing devil's advocate, if you've ever checked the comment section of the internet, it's really obnoxious. But devil's advocate can be useful in a group if you assign somebody to task in a group that is responsible for playing the other side or sharing a perspective that goes against what people in the group are talking about or believe that they should do. This is a really useful way for you to double check and just make sure that you have a good opinion on the topic. For instance, if you're trying to decide who to hire for a job, everybody says person A, and you agree person A is a better choice, what if you made the argument for person B? What does that tell you about why you all think person A is a better choice or a better hire? So playing devil's advocate can help you to reinforce that you have a good opinion on the topic, and also just make sure that you've exhausted all the options. You've thought about it from every angle. So another really key idea here is to take time for members of a group to think about it, right? If you've ever heard the phrase, "I'll sleep on it," it's the idea to give people in a group the time to really think through and to understand an issue so that they're not rushing to make a decision all at once. Again, people are more likely to sort of comply with the group's opinion if they don't have the time to develop their own opinion or thought. Again, doing something like sending out an agenda or a plan in advance is a great way to deal with groupthink too. Lets people have the time to focus. And right, there's no bad question. There's no like bad opinion. Oftentimes, when you look at how other opinions are being judged, or when people present an idea to the table, how it's responded to indicate if we're safe to share our own idea. So, right, if somebody is presenting an idea, what if we hire a person B? And then suddenly they say, no, there's no way we would hire that person. What a terrible idea, right? You're going to see that and think, yikes, this isn't a safe place for me to express my own view. So as a leader, one thing you can do is to make people feel open about expressing their own perspective, that it's not going to be judged or made fun of. There's no bad question, right? That's something I pretty strongly believe in the context of this and other classes. It doesn't make sense to make fun of somebody for expressing their point of view or concern because it discourages other people from doing the same. With that in mind, including some of the challenges and issues related to groupthink, I also want to take some time to talk about what makes for a good or strong or effective team. So, you know, like kind of when you go around and like if you're like me and played something like dodgeball or basketball or something similar to PE grade, you go back and forth and decide who to put on your team. When you're going through that process of selecting the team, oftentimes, right, people would pick the like strong, athletic type of folks to put on their team because they knew that that would help the team do well. So selecting team members in a good way, figuring out who are experts and really know their stuff is a good idea. If you're putting together a group, for instance, like a group of people to hire for a job, or you're putting together a new activity on campus, right, you're probably going to try to find people that are like-minded and also interested in the activity or group. Selecting a responsible leader, right? This idea that leadership can be somebody that's democratically chosen, that's appointed, choosing somebody that has those good traits you're looking for, open to new ideas, that take decisive action, has a clear vision, or shows the capacity to develop those. Cooperation, right? Good teams involve the opportunity for people to really work together, creating social connections, chances for people to really meet and to collaborate on an issue, right? We talked in this class about the challenge of social loafers. If you've ever done a group project, if you have somebody that just isn't contributing to the group, cooperation and good communication early on can really help to ameliorate that. Commitment, right? This is a really important issue. In fact, one thing that I think helps if you're running or participating in a meeting for them to go well is to verbally get people to sign on to or agree to do a task. For instance, we're putting together this symposium with the task team. We need 2 people to help to create posters. Who would like to volunteer? And then during the meeting and in the meeting minutes, clarify who's assigned to that task. So if people did not do it, you know, and are able to trace who completes that task or not. Clarifying responsibilities. Who needs to do what? That's an important consideration too. That people are clear about what their task and role is within the group. Having good prompt action, right? As a leader, you want to make sure you're able to address an issue that's come up in the group. Like maybe you have people that are coming to meetings. You can make sure that that's responded to in a good way. Applying technology, right? Using technology in a way that's accessible. For instance, giving folks a Zoom option to participate, giving people the chance to like use something like a computer or device with notes. There's a lot of really cool accessibility features that have become available. For instance, like the use of pens that can record and share back audio to help people along. And then giving good and quick feedback, right? If you verbally respond to somebody and say, hey, that's a really good idea or design for a poster, what if we change the color so that the text is easier to read? Like that real-time response is a lot more meaningful. It can be better understood than like getting an email a month later that says, hey, change the font, right? So good quick feedback can also help a team work together. There are also different categories of leaders that we can look at and start to understand. One of them is this idea of an autocratic leader. This gets in more of the like dictator type role, right? These are people that are very much setting the norms and setting the guidelines for the group. So under that type of system, the leader is calling the shots and creating this sort of culture and environment. A laissez-faire leader, right? This is a phrase, laissez-faire is a phrase that means basically hands off. This is a type of leader who doesn't really do much or offer or contribute much, but lets members of the group participate and do their own thing as part of the group, right? If you're familiar with Adam Smith's idea of the invisible hand, right, it's an economic theory that says that the economy is self-correcting, right? That's another laissez-faire way of thinking about issues where it corrects itself. Similarly, laissez-faire leaders believe that things will correct themselves within it. A leader as technician, right? This is somebody that comes in with a specific skill and expertise that they can offer to the group. Oftentimes, these are not folks that are the regular or the normal leaders. For instance, one thing that I really recommend, you might have encountered this yourself when you've been a part of a club or activity on campus, is sometimes you'll have, like during a group meeting, somebody like Title IX officer or somebody that's providing some type of training or information or sort of workshop for you to work on. One that we did in our team at University of Utah that I found was really useful was bystander intervention rating. Right? What can you do if there's instances of violence or abuse that come up? What are the things that you do to help that issue be resolved? That's an example of folks that might come in those leadership roles to train or to give you feedback or information you as members of the group don't otherwise have, right? What would normally be your team captain or coach sees leadership over that organizational leader. A leader as a conductor, right, is somebody that is really trying to put a team together to bring, that team back for a common goal. One example that I like to think about is if you've watched any kind of recent revivals or reunions of a lot of TV shows and movies, right? For instance, there was a reunion of the cast of Friends, right? Oftentimes there is a lot of hand reunion challenge to get everybody together, like all the castmates who have gone off and done very different things back in that role. Then a leader is a coach, right? It's the idea that coaching is providing this type of direct mentorship, skills building for the group. So in thinking about how to create a good team and how to get that team to work together, there's a few things that you can do to prepare and to help yourself to work together effectively. One of them being this idea of orientation and education. Ideally, you're somebody that's an expert, that you understand the task or issue. And if you don't, if this isn't a thing that you directly understand and know a whole lot about, that you're able to do the research and build the skills to help you work together. Again, think about a TV show like Ted Lasso, where the premise is that the main character has to coach soccer in a totally different country, right? He had to orient and educate himself about coaching a very different team. Nurturing and encouragement, the idea of supporting the group, right? Providing the ability to fall forward, to learn from your mistakes, right? When I did debate, I have situations where, we'd have teams that didn't win a single debate round, right? They were crestfallen, they had an awful experience, they got crushed, right? What was really useful was to say, okay, here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna take your speeches that you did during the debate, because you like alternate speakers. I want you to do a coaching meeting with me where you redo your speech and do it like the best way you possibly can. And that was a really great experience for me because it helped me to feel way more empowered and like I could improve on what I did. Assessment and correction, right? Assessment being this idea of reviewing, recapping what people in a group did. How do you help people work together better and achieving their goals? Listening and counseling. right? So this is a difficult line to walk. It's one that I walk as well, right? Where you want to be available to lend an ear, to listen to the group, to help the group as they're navigating the difficult issues, right? And at the same time, one really big challenge you should think about as a group leader is not to take on roles that you legally should not be able to do, right? For instance, if somebody has reported like an instance of abuse, you're a mandatory reporter. You need to report to student services, Title IX office, so on. You're not necessarily going to be like a licensed social worker or a licensed relationship expert. If somebody is having like major mental health issues, right, that have come up with them. What I like to tell students, right, is that they're struggling and dealing with some really serious mental health or physical health issues that, you know, there are resources and specific people to contact who are experts in those fields that can help you out, right? The joking way I refer to it is like, I'm not that kind of doctor, right? I'm not somebody that has the expertise to provide specific forms of counseling and support, and it does a disservice as a leader of a group to try to provide support that you're not qualified to, right? So listening, counseling, and support can be useful. You got to draw a line and make sure that you're not doing things that you should not, that you're not qualified to do as part of the group. And then also creating this idea of group emphasis, right? Members of a group understand and are responsible and are on task and are working together. So those are some things that you can do as you're participating in a group to make that experience strong. And then lastly, before I do the sort of part two prompt of the day, I want to talk a little bit about this idea of transactional leadership. One way of thinking about this is kind of like it's like a rat that pushes a button. When it pushes a button, it gets a treat, right? That's a similar way of thinking about transactional leadership. The idea that you motivate people with a reward or with an incentive, right? If they do well, they get a holiday bonus, or if they come in and do extra hours or work late, they get overtime pay, right? So this very kind of you do this, you get this is an approach that sometimes leaders will exhibit as well. So what I want to do now is have some groups take some time to share and to talk a little bit about this. I'll have the four folks here do so, and then I'll create a couple of breakout groups on Zoom. So Rachel wants to put together a robotics team. Hooray, that sounds awesome. So first of all, what can Rachel do to avoid groupthink and practices that she can do to prevent the group meetings from having that issue? What type of leader do you think Rachel should be? And similarly to that, what are the traits that Rachel should exhibit? So I want you to take some time to think through and maybe write down your answers to these questions, and then I'll have the groups share some of the things that worked for them. So Zoom folks, I'll create 2 breakout rooms for you. All right, so take some time to think through this.
Hello, guys. How are you guys today? Is it because it's Friday?
It is Friday.
Friday is a good day to have a fantastic day.
I know.
Yes.
I'm so excited.
I'm excited for summer. We got one more. This year is going by so far.
I feel like I have so much to, like, in my defense, I did have like 2 months where I was with them. It's like fast, but at the same time, I feel like January last. Okay. All right.
So Rachel wants to put together this team, right? And I think she could avoid group thinking by being very enthusiastic about hearing other people's ideas and being very open to other people's ideas.
She can also send out emails like, oh, here's what
if you have anything you want to incorporate.
And I'm gonna assume she knows quite a bit about robotics. She's trying to start her own team. When I'm going off what I'm saying, I think she could be like one of those, what's the thing, something coach?
Okay, like leader is coach.
Leader
Yeah,
is
yeah,
coach. Because she can kind of, there's probably gonna be people that come in that don't know what's going on. She can kind of teach those people, hey, this is
I
how
mean,
you
that's the
build
way
a
we
robot.
also say avoiding groupthink is making sure she has a diversity of people. If you have all people who kind of think like along the same lines, I feel like it takes a lot more likely. But if you have like a whole different diverse group from different cultural backgrounds, from different backgrounds in robotics, just to get like more perspectives and more ideas flowing.
What else? do you guys think?
Diverse is a big thing, so, yeah.
Yeah, I think you nailed it on the head with the leader as a coach. Like, she could possibly be a leader as a technician.
Yeah.
Like,
Or
in that case,
leader as a conductor.
yeah. I think it would be more leader as a doctor and leader as a coach.
Yeah.
She would be teaching and then mentoring if she did have that knowledge.
Yeah.
But then she would also be bringing people together because robotics seems to really want to go to a competition.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
What kind of traits should Rachel exhibit as the leader of robotics? Well, it doesn't even say she's supposed to be a leader, but I like how we put
Be
that.
patient.
I think accepting is a big one, especially if we didn't have a diverse group like we said.
Encouraging.
calm.
Yeah, that's why I said like patient.
Rational.
Rational, yeah.
Rational. To be a good leader, you have to be rational.
Yeah.
Irrational leaders are-
No, I disagree with your statement.
So.
I think in neutralism, I think that's something that's
Yeah.
super important. We have people on the extreme on either side. I feel like it makes it not great for the machine, which is the group, to function properly.
Yeah, it also makes it really difficult, but yeah, obviously.
Yeah.
So like if there's a neutral party, that's the best way to, hey, this person's ranting
Or
about it.
at least someone who can like take in and account for all of it. Like if you just like automatically have a set mindset on something and you aren't willing to be like, oh, that makes sense, okay, like
Yeah,
tell me more, like I feel like you won't get very far as a leader.
Closing up the breakout room.
Look at all our, there was a good lack of things there.
Yeah, I was gonna say, well, I like the way that when you were talking, where you would just add in ideas and thoughts in a very open way, right? Like you were just sort of brainstorming specific things that you could do in a group. Another way that can help with your think is to ask people to write down their own opinion before they hear from other people, right? If they come in advance, right, then they're less likely to like have an opinion that just changes over the course of conversation. Or if it does, right, it's in a way that's a little bit more sensitive. Right?
That's one thing I'm really bad about is I like will listen
So-
to people and I'll like instantly be like, oh, that makes sense, okay.
Let's take some time to share. So let's have the first Zoom group. So Francis, Jacob, Millie, and Presley. What did you all talk about in ways that Rachel could avoid groupthink? How did you all answer this first question?
So we decided that once Rachel has a group together, she should create an open environment where everybody can share their ideas and views on the subjects.
Mhm.
And also with that, looking at both sides of ideas and proposals, playing devil's advocate can enhance, well, lead away from groupthink, but also enhance her group's overall processing and ideas.
Yeah, like assigning devil's advocate can actually be like a task. You could have somebody in the group take notes and somebody who like has the fun role of like disagreeing or being oppositional to what everybody says. They might hate you in the moment, but it could help you to discover something new. Let's hear from the others in group. So Andre, Destiny, Sadie, and Trevor. What did you all do for the second question? What type of leader do you think that Rachel should be?
So we thought Rachel should lead as a conductor because we feel that she should be trying to, get everybody who has that common interest in robotics club.
Sure.
And then, already that's the common goal. So if you already have that shared interest, it kind of just makes it easier to lead, not as a coach, not as like a traditional leader, but kind of as more of a someone who has more leadership qualities than somebody else, basically. If that makes sense.
Yeah, I like what you're hitting on, Trevor, is this idea that a lot of times people in a group, there are specific things that draw them into the group that come pre-built and are specific things you can draw from to get members of the group to collaborate with each other. That everybody who's part of this forming group is interested in robotics, who does have the shared goal of this activity. Therefore, it's a lot easier to use that shared interest as a way to get people to get to know each other and to feel comfortable around each other. So shared interests are definitely a good starting point. And folks that are here face to face, you're welcome to share some of the traits and qualities that you all felt like Rachel should show for the group too. Yeah. So go ahead.
We said that the trick she should do is be encouraging and listen and educate, but just be neutral on everything. Willing to listen to everything.
Yeah. So if a group leader strongly shares their opinion early on, then other members of the group, because of power dynamics, are going to agree with them, right, and are less likely to share their views. So that's why oftentimes having a leader who waits and shares their opinion later on in the discussion can be good. Sometimes you get people in a group who are almost like the teacher's pet style, where they just want to do or say things that will agree with what they think the leader will think. If you take that dynamic away, if you encourage people to share their actual opinion, right, rather than what that leader wants to hear, then you can create a much more positive environment, right? You can maybe prevent a space shuttle from blowing. You never know. So to wrap up for today, again, just kind of a more low-key recap of things from the week. We talked a little bit about the leadership, openness, of engagement with the team and group. The idea that, again, we allow for different ideas and points of view to be shared. As a reminder, we're not meeting face-to-face next Monday. Instead, I'll post that prompt on Canvas and give you some instructions after class today to help you to access that. And we'll talk next week about group motivation. What is it that compels people to participate in groups? So go ahead and email or pass forward the attendance that you did at the beginning of class for today. Have an awesome weekend. If you're traveling, doing anything fun, have a great time. And we'll meet back again for next Wednesday.
Yeah.